They told us Oumuamua was a fluke. They told us it was a lonely rock, a cosmic iceberg tumbling through the dark, never to be seen again. The scientific community, in its infinite conservatism, wrapped itself in the warm blanket of coincidence and went back to sleep. But the universe does not care for our comfort. It does not care for our dogma. And now it seems the universe has sent a second messenger. And this time, the silence is deafening. Welcome back. I am Loeb, and today we must dare to look at what others ignore. There is a new player on the cosmic stage, an object that defies the simple, comfortable categorizations of the past. We call it Interstellar Object 3I Atlas. For weeks, the data has been trickling in, anomalous, confusing, provocative. But suddenly the narrative has shifted. The gatekeepers of data, the very institutions that urged us to look away from Oumuamua, have broken their silence. NASA has announced a sudden critical live stream. Why now? Why, after weeks of ambiguity, is the space agency stepping into the light in exactly 40 hours? We are standing on the precipice of a revelation, and the timing could not be more suspicious, nor more scientifically critical. Let us look at the facts, stripped of the ridicule that usually accompanies the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. NASA is releasing high-resolution imagery of 3I Atlas on Wednesday, the 19th of November. They are coordinating this release with a specific planetary geometry. The Earth, the Sun, and this intruder are aligning in a way that allows for maximum data retrieval, but also maximum exposure. They have disabled the chat on their live stream. They are controlling the flow of information. This is not the behavior of an agency discussing a dirty snowball. This is the behavior of an institution managing a narrative. But the story gets darker, or perhaps brighter, because the universe has decided to run an experiment for us. As we speak, a massive solar explosion, a coronal mass ejection, is barreling through the void. It was birthed from an angry sunspot group, a violent scar on the face of our star. This wave of plasma and charged particles is not headed for Earth. It is not headed for Mars. Based on the orbital trajectory data we have analyzed, this solar hammer is on a direct collision course with 3I Atlas. Think about the implications of this. We are about to witness a cosmic stress test. Around the 22nd of November at roughly 12 hours Universal Time, this wave of solar energy will slam into the object. If 3I Atlas is a simple comet, a loosely bound ball of dust and ice, the physics are predictable. The solar wind should strip it. We should see a disconnection event where the tail is ripped away by the magnetic violence of the sun. We saw this with the Rosetta mission. When a coronal mass ejection hit the comet, the magnetic field strength jumped from 30 nanotesla to 300 nanotesla. The plasma environment became chaotic. The comet reacted like a living thing, chemically speaking. But what if 3I Atlas does not react like a comet? What if this solar storm hits the object and the object does not break? What if the structure remains rigid? What if the outgassing does not behave according to the laws of thermal sublimation, but suggests something artificial? This is why the upcoming hours are the most critical in the history of modern astronomy. We have an object that is awake. 2 weeks ago, it was quiet. Now, observatories and amateur astronomers, the true heroes of this observational campaign, are reporting a very clear tale. They are reporting jets. They are reporting a large diffuse coma. It is energizing. It is reacting to the proximity of our sun. However, there is a discrepancy in the data that we cannot sweep under the rug. The rotation. We have calculated the rotation period of 3I Atlas to be approximately 16 hours. It is tumbling, slowly, methodically tumbling through the vacuum. In a natural comet, a rotating nucleus emitting jets creates a spiral. It creates a cloud. The gas and dust should diffuse outward into a chaotic, expanding fog. But that is not what we are seeing. We are seeing a downward-facing jet. We are seeing an anti-tail. These features appear stable. How do you get a stable, directional jet from a tumbling object? If you take a garden hose and spin it around your head, the water sprays in a spiral. It does not shoot in a straight line. Unless the mechanism controlling that jet is not passive. Unless the emission is guided. Now, my colleagues in the physics community, and credit where it is due to geophysicists analyzing the plasma dynamics, will tell you this can be explained by complex, dusty plasma physics. They will say that the electromagnetic environment around the nucleus is creating channels. They will talk about the ionopause and the bow shock. They will say that the electric field gradients are guiding the ions and the dust into stable columns, creating the illusion of a fixed jet on a rotating body. And they might be right. As a physicist, I must accept that plasma is a powerful sculptor of matter. The interaction between the solar wind and a charged dust cloud can do strange things. It can create structures that look ordered. But we must also remember the lesson of Oumuamua. When Oumuamua accelerated away from the sun, without a tail, without outgassing, the community invented hydrogen icebergs. They invented nitrogen chunks. They invented theories that had never been seen in nature, purely to avoid the alternative hypothesis that the acceleration was artificial. With 3I Atlas, we face a similar crossroads. The nucleus size is a ghost in the data. Early estimates from Hubble suggested a small nucleus, perhaps 2.8 kilometers in diameter. But newer models, trying to account for the massive coma and the optical density, have thrown out numbers as high as 50 kilometers. Do you understand the magnitude of that difference? 2.8 kilometers is a mountain. 50 kilometers is a city. If this object is 50 kilometers wide, and it is exhibiting these non-gravitational behaviors, and it creates a coma that at one point was estimated to be half the diameter of the Sun, 700,000 kilometers across, then we are dealing with a behemoth. And yet, the experts tell us to wait. They tell us to be calm. They tell us it is just another rock. But why is NASA disabling the chat? Why is the data being curated? Why are we relying on amateur astronomers stacking images in their backyards to see the truth? The image stacking is crucial. We must address the methodology because the skeptics are using bad data to blind you. If you look at a single raw frame from a telescope, 3I Atlas is a faint smudge. It is lost in the noise of the atmosphere and the electronic hiss of the sensor. To see the structure, to see the jets, you must take multiple long exposures. You must stack them, layering the light, boosting the signal-to-noise ratio until the invisible becomes visible. When you do that, when you strip away the noise, you see the structure. You see the sunward-facing jet. You see the complexity. The solar storm is coming. The 19th of November is the start of the revelation. The 22nd of November is the impact. We are watching a cosmic experiment unfold in real time. Will the tail snap? Will the object brighten? Or will it shrug off the fury of the sun and continue on its trajectory, unbothered, guided by physics? We are too arrogant to admit we do not understand. We must not be afraid to ask the question. We must not be afraid of the answer. Because if we look closely at the images NASA is about to release, we might not see a comet at all. We might see a techno-signature. The arrogance of the scientific establishment is to assume we are the only ones watching. But what if we are the ones being watched? What if 3I Atlas is not here to visit the sun, but to scan it? The data is about to drop, the storm is about to hit, and we are not ready. Let us dismantle the narrative that is being constructed for us, piece by piece. When the premier space agency of the world announces a revelation regarding an interstellar intruder, but simultaneously disables the ability for the public to speak, to ask, to engage in real time, one must ask, what are they afraid of? They tell us to use a hashtag on social media if we have questions. They filter the inquiry. They sanitize the curiosity. This is the modern scientific method. observation by committee, conclusion by consensus. But discovery does not happen by consensus. Galileo did not ask for permission to look through his telescope. He looked, and he saw the moons of Jupiter, and he destroyed the cosmology of his time. We are currently relying on the eyes of the public. The professional observatories are silent until they can curate their press release, but the amateur astronomers, the passionate individuals in their backyards with smart telescopes and stacking software, are the ones feeding us the raw truth. And the truth they are capturing is profoundly uncomfortable for the mainstream dogma. Consider the physics of this object. We are told 3I Atlas has a rotation period of roughly 16 hours. It is spinning. It is tumbling. In the vacuum of space, a natural object, a rock, a comet, a fragment of ice that is spinning and emitting gas should behave like a lawn sprinkler. The material should spray out in a spiral. It should create a diffuse cloud that surrounds the object evenly, or at least in a recognizable pattern consistent with angular momentum. But look at the images. Look at what the stacked exposures are revealing. We see a sunward-facing jet. We see a directional flow of material that appears stable. How do you maintain a steady, focused beam of energy or matter from a platform that is tumbling every 16 hours? If I hold a flashlight and spin around, the beam sweeps across the room. It does not stay fixed on a single point, unless the flashlight is not a flashlight, unless the emitter is actively correcting for the rotation, unless the object knows where it is pointing. The skeptics, breathless in their defense of the mundane, rush to the chalkboard to draw diagrams of dusty plasma. They invoke the complex interactions of the solar wind. They tell us that as the object moves through the interplanetary medium, the gas and dust it sheds are instantly ionized. They become plasma. And plasma, unlike neutral gas, is a slave to magnetic fields. They argue that the solar wind creates a bow shock, a magnetic drape around the object. They say that the electric field gradients in this cometary atmosphere are so strong, so precise, that they can funnel the ions into these tight, stable columns, creating the illusion of a stationary jet on a rotating body. I do not deny the elegance of plasma physics. I have spent my career studying the behavior of matter in extreme environments. The interactions between the solar wind and a charged dust cloud are indeed complex. We saw this with the Rosetta mission. When that comet interacted with a solar storm, we saw the magnetic field strength leap by an order of magnitude. We saw the environment light up and light. But there is a principle in science called Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. However, the scientific community has distorted this principle. To them, the simplest explanation is always the one that does not involve intelligence. They will invent incredibly complex, highly specific, rare alignment scenarios involving magnetic flux tubes and dusty plasma sorting mechanisms to avoid saying the word technology. If you see a plastic bottle on the beach, you do not calculate the geological processes that could have formed it from oil deposits over millions of years. You assume it was made. 3I Atlas is exhibiting behavior that requires us to stack unlikely natural coincidences on top of one another. We have a stable jet on a tumbler. We have an anti-tail. We have a coma that is vastly disproportionate to the estimated size of the nucleus. And speaking of the nucleus, this is where the data becomes truly chaotic. What is the size of this visitor? Hubble, in its early observations, suggested a diameter of roughly 2.8 kilometers, a respectable size for a comet. But as the coma expanded, as the cloud of dust and gas grew to be nearly half the diameter of the sun itself, the models broke. To sustain a cloud that massive, to output that much material, a nucleus of 2.8 kilometers seems insufficient. So, new estimates were floated. Some models now suggest the nucleus could be 50 kilometers wide, 50 kilometers. Do you realize the absurdity of this margin of error? We are debating the difference between a small village and a sprawling metropolis. How can our measurements be so wildly divergent? The answer lies in the albedo. the reflectivity. We judge the size of an object by how much light it reflects. If an object is dark, like coal, it must be huge to reflect a certain amount of light. If it is shiny, like ice or like metal, it can be much smaller to reflect the same amount. If the scientists are assuming it is a dark, dirty rock, they need it to be 50 kilometers wide to explain the brightness. But what if it is not dark? What if it is highly reflective? What if it is a thin metallic surface? Then it could be small. It could be 2.8 kilometers or even smaller and still shine with the intensity we are observing. We saw this with Oumuamua. It was 10 times more reflective than a typical asteroid. It was shiny, and because they could not accept that it might be artificial, they had to invent a new type of matter, hydrogen ice, to explain it. Now, with 3I Atlas, we are seeing the same confusion. The error bars are not just statistical noise, they are evidence of a fundamental misunderstanding of the object's nature. And into this confusion comes the solar storm. The timing of this coronal mass ejection is a gift from the cosmos. It is a laboratory test. We have a wave of high-energy particles, a shotgun blast from the sun, heading straight for the intruder. It will impact around the 22nd of November. When a normal comet is hit by a CME, it is a violent event. The tail can be severed, a disconnection event. The magnetic pressure of the solar wind overwhelms the comet's own weak magnetic environment, and the plasma tail is ripped away, drifting off into space like smoke in a gale. This is what we expect to see. If 3I Atlas is a comet, the tail should snap, the structure should destabilize. But what if it does not? What if the solar storm hits and the tail remains rigid? What if the object brightens, absorbs the energy, or deflects it? A natural comet has no defense against a coronal mass ejection. It is passive matter. It surrenders to the physics of the star, but a technological object? An object with a strong internal magnetic field? Or perhaps a propulsion system that uses the solar wind? Such an object might behave very differently. We are watching a stress test. The universe is hammering this object, and we are waiting to see if it rings like a bell or crumbles like a cookie. The NASA live stream on the 19th is the prelude. They will show us the high-resolution images from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter and Hubble. They will likely point to the coma, point to the tail, and say, "See, it looks like a comet. Case closed." They will use the visual similarity to comfort you. They will not talk about the rotation paradox. They will gloss over the nucleus size discrepancy. They will likely not mention the incoming solar storm until after it has happened, if at all. This is why we must be vigilant. We must look at the raw data. We must look at the images that the amateurs are stacking. Because in those grainy, noise-reduced photographs, we see the anomalies that the press releases ignore. We see the structure. Why is the chat disabled? Because they do not want us asking why the comet is maneuvering. They do not want us asking why the tail points the wrong way. They want a lecture, not a conversation. But the conversation is happening whether they like it or not. The evidence is mounting that our solar system is not a closed room. It is a train station, and most of the passengers are rocks and ice. Yes. But occasionally, just occasionally, a passenger arrives who is not a rock. A passenger who acts with intent. As we wait for the impact on the 22nd, as we wait for the curated images on the 19th, we must prepare ourselves for the possibility that we are looking at a machine that has traveled through the dark for aeons, only to be met with our silence, our fear, and our refusal to admit that we are not alone. The storm is coming. And when the dust settles, we may find that the object is still there, watching us, unharmed by the fire of our sun. We are living through a crisis of imagination. The scientific community is desperate to fit the square peg of 3I Atlas into the round hole of cometary physics. They are terrified of the alternative, because if they admit that the peg does not fit, They must admit that the hole they have dug for themselves, the rigid belief that we are alone or effectively alone, is too shallow to contain the truth. Let us conduct a thought experiment. Let us assume for a moment that we are not the smartest entities in the universe. Let us assume that a civilization arose 1 billion years before the first microbe swam in Earth's primordial soup. What would their technology look like to us? Arthur C. Clarke famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. I would propose a corollary. Any sufficiently advanced extraterrestrial technology is indistinguishable from nature to the untrained eye. If you wanted to send a probe to a star system, you would not build a gleaming saucer with flashing lights. That is Hollywood. That is primitive. You would build something rugged. You would build something that can survive the harsh radiation of interstellar space for millions of years. You might coat it in rock or ice to shield the delicate electronics from cosmic rays. You might design it to shed mass, to use the sublimation of surface material as a coolant or a propellant. To a distant observer, such a probe would look exactly like a comet. It would have a coma, it would have a tail, it would tumble, but the devil is in the details. A natural comet is a slave to gravity and heat. A technological object is a master of its own trajectory. We see 3I Atlas rotating every 16 hours, yet maintaining stable jets. We see a nucleus that defies mass-to-brightness calculations, suggesting it is either impossibly large and dark or impossibly small and reflective. And now, we see it bracing for a direct hit from our sun. This solar storm, this coronal mass ejection arriving around the 22nd of November, is the ultimate litmus test. If this object is a machine, the solar storm is not a threat. It is a resource. Consider the possibility of a light sail or a magnetic sail. We have theorized about these propulsion systems for decades. A magnetic sail creates a massive magnetic bubble around a spacecraft to deflect the solar wind, riding the pressure of the star like a ship rides the wind on the ocean. If 3I Atlas is using a magnetic sail to brake or maneuver, the interaction with the coronal mass ejection would look exactly like what we are seeing. A massive brightening, a chaotic but controlled plasma environment, and a refusal to disintegrate. While NASA prepares to tell you that this is just a dirty snowball acting strangely, I want you to look at the timeline. They waited until the object was at a critical geometry. They waited until the solar storm was inbound. They know that this interaction will produce data that cannot be easily explained. By controlling the live stream, by disabling the chat, they are ensuring that they can frame the narrative before the public has a chance to ask the hard questions. They will say, "Look at the tail. Only comets have tails." But I say to you, if I strap a smoke canister to a drone, it has a trail. Does that make it a cloud? The evidence is not in the superficial appearance, it is in the dynamics, it is in the motion, it is in the resilience. If, after the 22nd of November, 3I Atlas emerges from the solar plasma intact, if the tail does not disconnect, if the trajectory remains anomalous, then we have our answer. We are looking at a visitor that is robust. We are looking at engineering, not geology. And this leads us to the most chilling thought of all. Why is it here? Oumuamua passed us by quickly. It tumbled, it accelerated, and it left. It was like a bottle tossed into the ocean, drifting on the current. But 3I Atlas is different. Its approach, its interaction with the solar wind, its timing, it feels more deliberate. It feels like a scan. If you were mapping the galaxy, you would not send just one probe. You would send fleets. You would send different types of sensors. Oumuamua was the scout. Maybe 3I Atlas is the cartographer. It is dipping its toes into the solar wind, tasting the chemistry of our star, measuring the magnetic environment of our home. And what are we doing? We are arguing about whether the nucleus is 2.8 kilometers or 50 kilometers wide. We are staring at the finger pointing at the moon, rather than looking at the moon itself. We must dare to look. We must build our own instruments. This is the mission of the Galileo Project. We cannot rely on government sensors that are classified for national security. We cannot rely on space agencies that are terrified of losing their funding if they sound crazy. We need open data. We need transparency. We need to look at the sky with eyes that are not clouded by the arrogance of the past. The universe is teeming with potential. To assume that we are the only intelligence, the only technological civilization, is the height of mediocrity. It is a statistical impossibility. The cosmos is vast, and it is old. We are the new kids on the block, and someone or something has just driven past our house to take a look. So, on Wednesday when NASA goes live, do not just watch the pretty pictures. Look at what they are not showing you. Listen to what they are not saying. Look for the stack of the images. Look for the stability of the jets. Look for the survival of the tail after the storm. The 22nd of November is coming. The sun is firing its cannon. And somewhere out there in the cold dark between the planets, 3i Atlas is waiting to catch the shell. If it survives, the history of humanity changes. If it survives, we are no longer alone. We never were. The evidence is right in front of us. All we have to do is open our eyes.